10 awesome car technologies that never took off. Some inventions don't make the world a better place, like cars. Several amazing car technologies have come out over the years that promise to change the way we drive, but they never quite caught on with most people. What went wrong with these high-tech hopes, though? Stay tuned as we look at 10 cool car technologies that never caught on. Can you guess which future features didn't make it to the market? Number 10. 3 gloves that can be bought separately to help you drive in other countries. It sounds like a good idea, but a single glove that tells you which side of the road to drive on when you're in a different country seems like it would be useful more than once. The chances are that you'll remember which side of the road to drive on anyway if you take the time to buy it. Of course, the idea got some attention in the UK after being shown on the famous BBC show Dragon's Den, but not enough to become widely known. Number 9. Gullwing doors. Gullwing doors have been around for a long time. Sometimes they are hinged on the side of luxury supercars, but most of the time they are only found on idea cars. That's true of the above Nissan NX21, which came out in 1983. This Japanese car company thought it was a sign of what cars would be like in the 21st century, but it wasn't. Even though car companies keep trying to make gullwing doors popular, they just can't catch on. This is mostly because they have a lot of problems, like not being safe in a rollover accident or being hard to get out of. There are some improvements with the Tesla Model X's Falcon doors, but since their complexity caused the car to take so long to get to market, we doubt that other car companies will be rushing to add them to their cars. Number 8. Engines with turbines. Not only did the NX21's doors look too far into the future, but it also had a 99 BAP gas turbine engine in the back. It's clear that the turbine was better than other engines at the time because it could run on kerosene, light oil, and alcohol, and had fewer moving parts and less shaking. It's too bad it never caught on. In the 1950s and 1960s, Chrysler was at the head of research into turbine car engines. However, the government shut down the program after giving Chrysler money to stay in business. At the time, it was trying to solve problems like using a lot of fuel, because the turbines spin at such high RPMs, being expensive to make, and having slow throttle reaction because you had to wait for the turbine to spin up before you could see a change in speed. Since Chrysler stopped trying to fix these problems and no other company took turbine engines seriously, the technology stayed in the realm of science fantasy. Many people have seen an old grainy movie for years that shows off Bose's amazing suspension technology. This technology keeps the car level no matter what the road surface does. We all wondered why it never caught on with the public, so it was great to finally find out earlier this year that Bose said it was too hard to use and too expensive for the general public. Number 7. Small electric public transportation in cities. The Sinclair C5 shown above is a great example of this. The idea was to make a small electric car that could be used instead of a car. This may be a more important idea now than ever, but has never really caught on. The problem with the C5 was that it wasn't much better than a bicycle and cost a lot more at 399 pounds, equal to about 845 pounds today. It was just as dangerous as a bike and didn't protect against the weather any better. It also had a bad range and a battery that died quickly. The Renault Twizy, which is probably the best example of this type of car on the market today, could still be blamed for everything except the lack of range. Although I would love to own a Twizy because it's so much fun. It's hard to see why you should when they cost almost 7,000 pounds brand new. On the used market, you could easily find a real city car that has been crash tested for less money. Number 6. Brakes that rocket. Rockets. For the brakes. It's not hard to figure out why this one didn't catch on, but they were very interesting when they were featured in the magazine Modern Mechanics in 1946. It was only supposed to be used in an emergency, and early tests showed that it could stop up to 2 grams of force. What are the cons? It's not good that the propellant would burn with about the same effect as several gallons of gasoline in case of a fire. People who were close to the car when the rockets went off might also get a little crispy. It's not a surprise that disc brakes were seen as a little safer. Number 5. Engines with steam. You probably think of trains when you hear the word steam engine, but you might be shocked to learn that in the early days of the car, steam engines and engines that ran on fossil fuels were almost tied for first place. In China in the 1670s, a Flemish missionary named Father Ferdinand Verbiest made a toy car that ran on steam power. This was the start of the steam car. A man named Nicholas Cugnot made a 3-wheeled vehicle about 100 years later. It had an outside steam engine and was big enough to carry people. It was hard to use steam engines because they were big, heavy, and slow. To give the steam engine one last big push, a brave driver named Fred Marriott sped a Stanley steamer to 127 miles per hour in 1906. This is still the land speed record for a steam-powered car. Even though this was a great accomplishment, ICE engines were smaller and easier to keep up, so the steam thing never really caught on once cars were mass-produced. Number 4. Cars that fly. Not making flying cars a reality is one of the worst things that science has ever done. The idea of being able to drive through the sky in our cars has been teased us with for decades. Since the Jetsons in the 1960s and Star Wars in the 1970s, flying cars have been a big part of our image of the future. The first attempt at something like a flying car was made by Henry Ford in 1926. He tried to build a small, one-seat aeroplane, but a driver died during a test flight and Ford gave up on the idea. In 1940, he said, "Take my word for it. An aeroplane and a car that work together are on the way. It will happen, even if you smile." There is some truth to what he says, but we're still waiting. Thus far, the Aeromobile 3.0 is the most like it. It can be driven on the road like a car, but it can also simply spread its wings and fly. Even so, it doesn't really fit in with regular traffic. NASA started the Personal Air Vehicle Sector project in 2003, so there's still a chance that people will one day be able to fly cars. A car has to meet certain requirements in order to be called a real personal air vehicle. For example, it has to be so easy to drive that anyone with a license could do it. Number 3. The Tucker Safety Windscreen. The Tucker 48 had a pretty unique safety feature. The glass could be taken off. Tucker put in a windscreen that wouldn't break and would pop out if it was hit. This was done because he was worried that broken glass could seriously hurt people who were thrown through the window in a crash. Since 1948, Tucker has been making it safer to be thrown through a windscreen face first onto the pavement. That sounds like it would be more useful than, say, car belts. Number 2. The power that turns. When it comes to Mazda's RX sports cars, the rotary engine is our favorite shape. Unfortunately, stricter pollution rules meant that the Japanese company had to give up on its Wankel design engines. Since no other car companies were interested in the idea, rotaries died out after a short time on the edges of the mainstream. Mazda showed off the RX Vision idea in October of last year, so it looks like the company hasn't given up on the rotary engine just yet. Even if the RX-7 comes back with a rotary engine, it's still safe to say that the rotary never really took off, even though it was great and could rev freely. Number 1. Building a modular body. Ital Design showed off its one-of-a-kind Capsula concept car in 1982. It was mostly a frame that had wheels, an engine, balance, a gas tank, and many other things that are needed to drive. What's interesting is that there was a capsule cabin above that was easy to switch out for a different design. The idea behind this chassis design was that it would be easy to switch between vehicles that are usually very different from each other. For example, you could have a van during the week and a low-slung sporty design on the weekends. The VW Group uses modular chassis these days, so brands like Seat, Skoda, VW, and others use pretty much the same architecture. But the Capsula was more special than that. Many body styles could be put on the same frame and easily switched out, giving the owner a lot of options. We're kind of sad that this never happened. If you love exploring the coolest car tech and the stories behind them, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Stay tuned for more deep dives into the world of automotive innovation past, present, and future.